morning, good evening, or depending on your time zone, good afternoon, and welcome to PSAT Prep Live, our weekend marathon PSAT extravaganza here, powered by Kaplan. Let me know in the chat, how's it going? How are you feeling on this lovely Saturday morning, evening, or afternoon, depending on your locale in the world? I am Boris. I'll be your teacher on camera, but if you've ever done anything with us before, you know I'm not your only teacher. I'm joined behind the scenes by a veritable squadron of PSAT experts. We got David, we got Nick, we got Steve. They are PSAT teachers just like me. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat because that's exactly why they're here, is to answer questions. And we hope that you don't feel judged or anything like that for asking questions. If you have a question, put it in. If that expert answer helps you get a better score on test day, it'll be a good thing that you asked. Don't worry about anybody thinking anything about your question. Just get it in there. Take advantage of this incredible squadron of teachers behind the scenes who are here to help you out. And we have a pretty small group, so you're not bugging anyone. I'm sure that with how few students we have at the moment, Steve, Nick, and David would love to get as many questions as you've got. Servani, glad to hear you're doing good. I am also doing really well. I'm really excited. Later today, I'm teaching calculus. So I've got the whole spectrum on Saturday. I'm really excited, going all the way from the PSAT at the beginning of the test journey up to AP Calculus, which is going to be at the end for some folks. Now, I also got to give a shout out to our tech wizard, Rich, behind the scenes. You won't see him in the chat, but none of this would be happening if he weren't here. He's logged in like 4 times and different computers to make everything work. So it's going to be awesome thanks to his expertise. We really appreciate having you here, Rich. All right, folks, let's go ahead and get cracking. So we're going to start with a quick introduction to the PSAT. I don't want to spend too much time here, but just so you know, this is the format of the test. This is how many questions you'll have in reading, writing, language, and math, and how much time you'll have for each of those questions. Just know that math is split between calculator and no calculator, so it's not going to be, this one giant 70-minute 48 question test. Some of those questions will be in a separate section that is non-calculator. There is a URL here that shows you where you can find official PSAT questions. By official, we mean written by the test makers themselves, which is a really great resource. And if you're like, well, how do I click on that? I can't click on that. Make sure you grab the PDF at the top of the chat. Our amazing teacher, David, has put the link up there before the session began. Click on that and you'll find a handout for today's session. You'll absolutely need it today when we do reading practice and to a lesser extent writing practice. But I recommend grabbing it now just because in that PDF you can click on this hyperlink. You do not need to type that out character by character. Once you get the PDF open in your browser, you can just click that link and save the link to the National Merit official PSAT sample questions. Okay, so some notes about PSAT scoring. There's no wrong answer penalty. People sometimes ask what this means. It just means a wrong answer and a blank answer are the same thing. So if you're running out of time, you should bubble in a random letter for all the questions that you skipped. I do B for Boris, but I'm not here to push any, B for Boris agenda on anybody else. I don't want anyone to feel pressured. Do whatever is your favorite letter. Do note that statistically, putting in the same letter every time is the same thing as guessing random letters, so don't feel the need to pick a random letter each time. Just pick one at the beginning and always put that one in. Now, I'm not going to explain the scoring mechanics, but to kind of give a brief overview, reading, writing, language, and math will each separately have a score ranging from 8 to 38. And this is a little bit weird because, as you may know, on the SAT, reading and writing are combined into a verbal score. But on the PSAT, you have a separate score on reading, writing, language, and math. This is turned into something called a selection index. Following the formula, you double your score and add them together. And based on your selection index, you might qualify for a scholarship. This is the main reason to do well on the PSAT, is that if you do really, really well, you can get potentially a scholarship, and it can be significant. I was a National Merit finalist back in the Mesozoic era when I went to school amidst dinosaurs and, the formation of the Great Canyon. And as a result, I was offered a free ride to Ohio State University in my hometown of Columbus, Ohio. I don't know if that's still on the table today, many moons later, but you can get really significant scholarship opportunities for becoming a National Merit finalist. Let me know in the chat, folks, what happens if you do badly on the PSAT? If you get a poor score and don't get a scholarship, what will happen? It's a little bit of a trick question. Like to throw those out every once in a while. If you get a poor score on the PSAT, the bad thing that happens is nothing. Nothing bad happens. Colleges don't consider the PSAT in applications in any way whatsoever. So it's important to note, like, I don't want to say like it's irrelevant how well you do, because if you do well, you do get a reward. And if you don't hit that high mark, then you don't get that reward, which is, sad. But you don't get like bad things happening. Like you're not going to be blocked from going to college or anything like that if you get a poor score on the PSAT. So do the best that you can, but limit how much stress you place on yourself for this test, because it's only upside. There's no downside to doing poorly. Now there's a great question from Servani. What score do you need to be in the 99th percentile? Now, just so you know, the selection index that I mentioned ranges from 48 to 228. And what you can do is you can Google what you need to get on the selection index in order to qualify as a national merit finalist. This varies from state to state. So if you're in a really heavily populated state like New York or California, you have to do better than if you're like in Montana. Now, we're not going to give you those numbers today because there are no official numbers from the National Merit Foundation, which makes sense. The test makers don't know what selection index will qualify in each state, because it's basically like the top, 1% or something like that in each state, and that can vary from year to year. So all the results you'll find on Google are basically what the cutoffs were for the previous year. So there's no like official number that I can give you, and we don't want to post speculation based on past years, but still Googling it and looking up the selection index that you needed in previous years to become a finalist will give you a rough idea of how well you need to do. And it's important to note that when you Google the results, it is going to be in the form of this selection index, which is a very weird score that, again, I'm not going to explain today because it's a bit confusing, but it's like the 8 to 38 on each of the three tests doubled and added together. What most people will do when they report PSAT results is take the combined verbal score with the math score. So for the PSAT, each section is going to range from 160 to 760 for a total score out of 1520, which is a little bit different from the SAT, which is 1600, but it's basically the exact same scale. The SAT is 400 to 1600, the PSAT is 320 to 1520. It's more or less the same thing. You just need to like add 80 to your PSAT score, and that would give you an approximation of what you would get on the SAT. There is also the formula in the handout here on this page, the PSAT scoring page, if you would like to study it and figure out how that selection index is turned into the more traditional score that you see out of 1520. That is page 4 in the handout that's linked at the top of the chat. Madeline's wondering, do colleges see our PSAT scores? And the answer is kind of. You will get a lot of college brochures in the mail if you do well on the PSAT. And I'm not exactly sure how it works. I don't know if they see your score or if they just find out who did well or who became a finalist or something like that. But I won't say that your colleges are completely blocked from seeing your PSAT score, but what I can guarantee is that it has absolutely no bearing on college applications. So even if colleges do get like your bad score somewhere, it's not going to hurt your chances when you apply. This table here on page 5 has some percentiles if you want to look those up if you're curious. Just so you know, percentile means what percent of people answered fewer questions right than you did. So basically, if you get a 1250 in 10th grade on the PSAT, that would put you in the 95th percentile, meaning that 95% of test graders who took it got fewer questions right than you. Notice that a year later, when people take it in 11th grade, they tend to do better. So it's a little bit more competitive in 11th grade. And for those of you who are sophomores, I do want to caution you, only the 11th grade score counts for scholarships. So if you get a 99th percentile in 10th grade, you have to repeat that feat the following year to get the scholarship, which can be nerve-wracking, I know that, but just be prepared for that. I still think it's a good idea to take it in 10th grade just to find out how you do. And certainly if you did really well in 10th grade, you can do very well in 11th grade as well, but just know that only the 11th grade score counts. The scholarship information is in your handout on page 6. So I saw actually Artur was asking about this. So if you're curious about that, you can read some of these notes. I'm not going to read them now because I know that you know how to read, and I do want to, of course, focus today on practice questions and teaching you strategies, but this information is here if you're curious for more details about the scholarships. Okay, let's go ahead and get right to cracking. So we're going to do everything in the next 2 hours. We're going to review math, reading, and writing. And in our first session here of PSAT Prep Live, our focus is going to be on strategy. You do need to know a lot of math to do well in the PSAT, but today we're going to focus on 2 strategies that you can use on some of the questions, regardless of the math being tested. We're going to show you how to read actively and get the big picture of a passage, which will be our reading passage strategy. And then for writing and language, of course, you'll be practicing a lot of grammar in preparation for the PSAT, but today we're just going to focus on the method that we will use for writing and language questions. If you come back tomorrow for session 2, we'll get into math content, reading comp question types, and some of the actual grammar rules that get tested in writing and language. Okay, let's get started. So on the PSAT, at face value, it appears that every question needs to be solved using math. So if you see a question like this, Nova's essay is 129 fewer words than Kai's essay. The total word count is 875. How many words is Kai's essay? It looks like you have to set up a system of equations, translate the English into math, and solve. And the thing is, you can do that. In fact, I bet someone has already done this. If so, please put your answer in the poll, which will either be in a separate tab in the chat or down below the video player. So we do request that we keep the answers out of the poll just to avoid spoilers for people who are still working on it. We'll be deleting answers in the chat. We're not mad. We're not going to like hate you or kick you out or anything. But if you can remember, try to put your answers in the poll. David will be our poll master today. But also, let me show you an approach you could use to solve this question without actually doing any translation, systems of equations, or proper math. So first thing we always want to do in a PSAT problem, and this is regardless of the strategy that we end up using, is we want to identify what is the question asking. Here, the question's asking for the number of words in Kai's essay. The next thing that we want to do is determine what information the test makers have given us to solve this question, and that is 2 facts. One is that Nova's essay has 129 fewer words, and that the combined total of their essays is 875 words. Once you've got the question and the information, you go to step 3 where you choose your strategy. And for some questions, you will want to do math. You'll look at the question and go, yeah, this is one I want to solve using math, and you'll do math. But one strategy that you might use sometimes is called back solving. The idea with back solving is that you're going to take the choices and plug them back into the question to see which one works. So let's say we try choice B and we just pretend for a moment that Kai's essay is 502 words long. Now let me know in the chat, if Kai's essay is 502 words, then how long is Nova's essay? Well, we would take 502, subtract 129, and we'd get 373 words. Now, if Kai's essay is 502 and Nova's essay is 373, then how many words are their essays combined? To find this, we would add the number of words in Kai's essay, which is 502, and the number of words in Nova's essay, which is 373. Very nice, Varchas. Very nice, Madeline. Nice work, folks, here. We'd add those together, and you get 875 words. Excellent, Arthur. Very good, Stravani. Cyber 5, folks. Okay, so now you have to stop and do step 4 of the math method, which is, am I done? So are we done? We just tested choice B. Are we done with this question? The answer is yes. Yes, we are done with it because we got a combined total of 875 words. The question says that we're supposed to have 875 words, so we are good to go. Now, what do you think? Should we check the other choices just to be sure? You know, just to make sure nothing funky happened? No. Your attitude needs to be, I'm a PSAT god. And even if you don't think it, Pretend that you think it. Pretend that you think that you are a PSAT god, and if you think it's B because you're awesome. And then you're done. All you care about on test day, folks, is bubbling in the correct circle on your grid. You're not there to do math, you're there to get a scholarship. And you don't get a scholarship by doing math. You get a scholarship by having enough correct circles bubbled in the grid. Once you know what circle to bubble, you bubble it and you move on with the PSAT. Bam, we're done. We're going to grab a very auspicious and my totally unbiased favorite answer choice of all time, choice B for Boris, and move on with the test. So if you look at this and go, you know, I would rather just set up an equation and solve, that was easier for me, great, do that. Step 3 strategy, that's your step. You shouldn't just always do what we do in class, you should do what's going to work best for you. But I will say this, if I took the PSAT with you next Wednesday, I would definitely back solve on some of the questions. So if a professional PSAT teacher sometimes back solves, it's certainly not a bad thing to sometimes back solve. It's a good tool to have in your toolkit. It's a good skill to develop. Now in this question, I just started with choice B. And maybe you think I did that because I already knew that B was the correct answer. I promise you that's not why I began with choice B. I'm going to now let you try question number 14 on your own. Note, by the way, that page 13 of the handout has this math method that I shorthanded and that I will paste on the screen here so that you can have it kind of running along as we do the questions today. I'm going to let you try this question on your own. And this is a question that comes with an optional side quest. See if you can figure out why we start with choice B when we back solve. Now, you're not going to see a timer on the screen, but I will have a timer running on my computer for about 1.5 minutes. And when time is up, we're going to review. Good luck. Don't forget to vote in David's poll and not in the chat. And we'll see you soon for review. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review question number 2. So step 1, we're asked for the maximum number of chairs that Amelia can assemble if she assembles one table. The information is that assembling a chair requires 24 nails and assembling a table requires 36 nails. And she's got 150 nails to work with. So that's all the information, and that's the question. Now we go to step 3, strategy. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with setting up an inequality and solving. If you do that, that's fantastic. Great. You're going to get it on test day, be totally fine. But let's try our strategy of back solving. So let's suppose that she makes 5 chairs. Let's just suppose that she makes 5 chairs. Let me know in the chat, folks, how many nails is it going to cost her to make 5 chairs? Well, it takes 24 nails to make 1 chair. So if she makes 5 chairs, it'll be 5 times 24 nails, which is also known as 120 nails. Okay, now she also needs to make a table. How many nails is it going to cost her to make that table? Sravani, Varchis, Cyber, high five. And by the way, you notice I'm saying your names a lot. If I do mispronounce your name, if I say your name incorrectly, please let us know in the chat, and my off-camera teachers will let me know and make a note so I can try to say your name correctly in the future. It's totally on me if I mispronounce your name, 100% my responsibility. And if you let us know how to pronounce it, I'll do my best to say it correctly from that point forward. Very good, Arturo. We need another 36 nails to make a table, because it says she's making one table. There's that little bit thrown in at the end. She assembles one table, and it takes 36 nails to do that. Very good, Varchis. Very good, Melon. We have to add another 36 nails. So we're looking at 156 nails. Now let me know in the chat, folks. Is that okay? Any problem with the 156 nails? What are we thinking about this? Oh, I saw Sravani already said this before I asked. Samurai, fine. Very nicely done. She doesn't have enough. She only has 150 nails. But if she does choice B and makes 5 chairs, she's going to use up 156 nails. She'll be 6 nails short. So B is wrong. But let me know in the chat, besides observing that B is wrong, what else can we do? Well, we can also say that C and D are wrong too, because if 5 chairs used up too many nails, using more chairs would use up even more too many nails. And this is the key to the kingdom right here, folks. Please stop and ask our off-camera teachers a question. David, Nick, and Steve, if you're not sure about this, this is a big moment. Make sure you understand why we crossed off C and D, not just B, the choice that we tried. Isabella, Servani, Cybri 5, Artur, absolutely. You crushed it. So we don't need to plug in choice A, right? Step 4, are we done? Yeah, we're done, actually. Even though B wasn't correct, we're still done, because what's the point of checking A? You're a PSAT god. If you think B, C, D are wrong, they are wrong, because you're awesome. So that leaves just A. Grab it. Don't even check it. That's boss mode activated on test day, and you can move on with the PSAT. How many people at your school do you think are going to be confident enough to pick a choice without even testing it? Not a whole lot. This is the benefit of preparation. The benefit of using your spare time this weekend to come here is that you learn these behaviors that help you feel more confident and take less time on the test. Feeling more confident means that more of your brain is free to solve problems instead of being tied up with anxiety and nerves. And you also have more time to answer questions because you're not spending time doing math that is not actually helpful. Now, in this example, we explained why you try B first, because maybe B is too big and you can pick A immediately. However, backsolving can be a useful strategy even if you cannot do this like up and down thing after checking a choice. And that's what our next question is about. I'm going to jump to PQ2 here before we do before we do PQ1 on slide 15, because this question doesn't have an up and down element, but backsolving is still a really useful strategy. If you're someone who looks at that and go, oh, well, I would just solve it using algebra because it's an equation, again, that's totally fine. But also consider just trying backsolving to see how it works. Again, I'll give you 90 seconds. And when we start this practice, you won't see the timer on the screen. But I will be off cam and mic while you work, and when a minute and a half is up on my computer, we're going to come back and review this one. Good luck, and enjoy the practice. All right, folks, let's review question PQ2. Test makers are asking you for basically the solution to the equation. Information is the equation. Not a whole lot going on. But when you go to the answer choices and look at those, you realize that only two of them have numbers. The other two choices are weird. And what this means is that back solving might actually be a pretty decent approach. Normally, when I see an equation on the PSAT, I solve it using algebra because solving an equation with algebra is not too bad. But if there's only two numbers to check, back solving could be a consideration. Now, I see in the poll that nobody voted for choice A. Good job, everybody, crossing off A. If you test choice A, all the x's turn into 0, so we just lose those x terms. And what we get, I'll do this in red, is on the left, you have a 3 times 1, which is 3 minus 0. And on the right, you have a negative 7. So, womp womp, that is not correct. 3 does not equal negative 7, so we can get rid of choice A. Now, let's try choice B, x equals 4. We'll do this one in blue. Let me know in the chat, folks. What do you get on the right side of this equation when you plug in a 4 for x? This isn't too bad as far as arithmetic goes. 3 times 4 is 12, and 12 minus 7 is 5. Now, the left side looks a lot more complicated, but notice that those fractions are fourths. The test makers are being really, really nice here by having it simplify super well. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and a quarter times 4 is, again, 1. So what this is really is 3 times 1 plus 1, 3 times 2, which is 6, minus 1. Oh, 6 minus 1, that does equal 5. So choice B, x equals 4, works. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that you can pick it, but we look at the other choices. D claims there are no values of x for which there's a solution. False. When you plug in a 4, there is a solution. So it's not D, which, by the way, 100% of you, Cybri5, also eliminated. So well done. But between B and C, how do we judge it? Well, this is where Varchus's comment in the chat comes in handy. Can't you also get rid of C because it doesn't work? Oh, because A didn't work? You can't get rid of C because A didn't work. There might be infinitely many values, and 0 might not be one of them, right? Infinitely many values doesn't have to include 0. For example, there are infinitely many powers of 4. There are infinitely many odd numbers. There are infinitely many, multiple positive multiples of 10. So there's lots of infinite series of numbers that are not 0. However, we can get rid of C because this is a linear equation. It's just x raised to a power. So a little bit of general math knowledge is helpful here. When you have just like a single x raised to the power of 1, you're not going to get infinitely many solutions. So for that reason, we're going to get rid of choice C. It is choice B. We can grab B for Boris here and confidently move on with the PSAT. Good question from Savani. Since 4 works, can multiples of 4 work? No. If you plug in like 8, 12, 16, you do not get correct answers for that. Another way that you can tell this is that if you actually plug in, or if you distribute on the left side, what happens is you get 3/4 x minus 1/4 x, which is a half x. So your x term on the left is a half x, your x term on the right is 3x. They're not the same, so the x won't cancel, and therefore there cannot be infinitely many values of x. So it's another reason you can cross off C and stick with choice B. All right, so now we've seen several cases where back solving helps. Back solving helps when you've got like an up and down situation. If a choice is too big, you can pick choice A. Or we can have a case like this where it's more flexible and open-ended, but it's still quite convenient to plug in numbers instead of doing a bunch of fraction arithmetic and distribution solving with algebra. I am going to give you a chance to try a question on your own, PQ1, where you can choose your approach. Maybe you're going to want to just do math on this, and that's totally fine. Maybe you'll want to back solve. That's also totally fine. Do whatever you think is going to work best for you. Practice this method in full, deciding for yourself on the best way to approach a problem. Again, I'll pause my camera and I'll have a timer on my computer for 1.5 minutes. When 90 seconds are up, we're going to come back and review. Good luck, everybody. Enjoy the practice. Welcome back, everybody. Let's review this question. I'm going to show it with back solving just because that's our focus today, but if you did algebra and solved it, that is totally fine. Always do the math questions in whichever method works best for you. Okay, step one, we're asking for the value of P. Step two, information. Okay, what's the information? There's a $90 registration fee. We then pay P bucks per month. And apparently the first 6 months are going to set us back a very pretty $1,038. All right, it is not cheap to learn Taekwondo. Now we get to step three, strategy. Again, if you think, oh, easy peasy as goblin pie, let's just solve an equation, get it done on the first try, cool. But if you're looking at it and go, I don't know how to translate this, let's try back solving. So the idea is if we're back solving, we're going to start with choice B, and we're going to say, okay, let's pretend that it costs 170 bucks a month for the first 6 months. Let me know in the chat. If you're paying 160 bucks a month, or sorry, 170 bucks a month for 6 months, how much money are you going to shell out? Well, 6 times 100 is 600, 6 times 70 is 420, so we're looking at $1,020. But don't forget that $90 registration fee. Add 90 to that, and we're looking at $1,110. 1110. Pause for a moment there, digest, make sure that makes sense. Ask David, Nick, and Steve if you have any questions. If you don't know where any of those numbers came from, ask where that number came from, and they'll be able to help you out in the chat. Now, is this the right answer? No, because we're supposed to pay only 1,038 bucks. But instead we paid over 1,100 bucks. And I'm looking at the poll, 100% of you got this, so I'm not going to belabor this. 100% of you saw that, okay, if B is too much money, C and D would be even more too much money, so the answer has to be choice A. We can go ahead and grab A for awesome and move on with the PSAT. Of course, in these examples, it always turned out super nice, but if B was too little, you'd get rid of B and A, leaving C and D. You would check one of them and then either pick it or pick the other one if it didn't work. So you're at most testing 2 choices in this scenario, and half the time you only have to test 1. This is why back solving can be a really effective strategy. Now, our last back solving problem before we move on is one that doesn't actually work out super nicely. You cannot move the up and down thing, and it doesn't, there's no way to easily limit your choices or cross multiple choices off with just one test. However, this question, I'm just going to tell you, this is the only one of the ones we've done so far that I would 100% of the time do with back solving on the PSAT. You can give me a million PSATs and I would never do a question like this with math. So if you want to see a question that an actual PSAT teacher would do with back solving every single time, this is it. I'm going to give you 90 seconds. Try it out on your own, and when time is up, we're going to review. Good luck, everybody. Enjoy the practice. Hey everyone, welcome back. Let's review this question. So the test makers are asking for the number of books that the movers have. The information is two very weird pieces of, well, the information is two weird facts. If we put 8 books per box, there will be 2 books left over. And if we basically find 4 more books total, then we can pack them up 9 per box and have no books left over. So it's really weird. And by the way, if you ever get to a question and step 1 or step 2 is confusing, like you don't know what the question is asking or the information confuses you and you have no idea what's going on, that's one to skip, folks. One of the easiest PSAT test taking strategies to implement is just skipping questions. Listen to your heart. When you feel panicky or annoyed or like, oh, this is confusing, just listen to yourself, skip the question, move on. You want to spend as much time as possible on test day working on the questions that you can solve. All the time that you invest in questions that you don't end up solving correctly is wasted. So it's not what you want to do. You want to bubble in as many circles as possible. It does take some practice because we're not trained to do this, so it feels weird to most people. But practice, and I promise you can get really good at skipping questions and get to the point where it feels natural and also feels awesome because you know that you're raising your score when you do that. But okay, let's say that that makes sense. You go to step 3 strategy. It is back solving time. And watch how this is going to work. So we start with choice A. 36. Hey folks, if I have 36 books and I'm packing them away in boxes of 8, 8 in a box, 8 in a box, 8 in a box, 8 in a box, am I going to have 2 books left over? Well, no, because the biggest multiple of 8 that's less than 36 is 32. If I'm packing away books in a rate of 8 per box, I'm going to pack away 32 books, 8 times 4, and then I'm going to have 4 books left over. This is wrong, and we can cross off choice A. This is a choice that got some votes in the poll, by the way, but notice if we just back solve on it, crosses off instantly. Do please, though, if that doesn't make sense, ask Steve, David, and Nick in the chat. Why is A wrong? Where did 32 plus 4 come from? What does that mean? Servani Vart just nailed it. Cybri 5U2. You will have 4 left over. Then we cross this choice off. Okay, let's try choice B. With choice B, we have 42 total books. Now, let me know in the chat, folks, if I have 42 books and I pack them away in groups of 8, will I have 2 books left over? Okay, this time I will. I will this time, because 40 is a multiple of 8. It's 8 times 5. And once you've packed away 40 books, you will have 2 books left over, just like the question says. So for this one, we have to use the other piece of information. The movers find 4 more books. Okay, well, once they find 4 more books, they're going to have 46 books. If you have 46 books, you're going to be able to pack them up in books in boxes of 9 books and have no books left over. You can't, because 46 is not a multiple of 9. 9 times 5 is 45, not 46. So choice B is wrong because of the second piece of information, that if you add 4 books to 42 books, you get 46 books, which is not a multiple of 9. Again, ask our amazing off-camera teaching squad if you're not quite sure why B is wrong. Let's go to choice C. Okay, if I'm packing away books in 8 books per box, am I going to have 2 books left over with 50 initial books? Varchus earlier said that C works, and Varchus is right because 6 times 8 is 48. 48 is a multiple of 8, and we have 2 books left over. Now, at this point, you could do the thing that we did with choice B, where we, do the check with the second piece of information. But, a little trick here is just check out D. Maybe D is wrong like A was. Then we don't need to finish the math. We can just pick choice C and move on by elimination. Look at what happens. Servani was saying we can eliminate D because it is a multiple of 8. Well, yeah, if you have 72 books, you're going to put away all 72 with no books left over if you're packing them away in groups of 8, since 8 times 9 is 72. So we don't even have to finish our work on C. You're a PSAT god. If you think A, B, D are wrong, they are wrong because you're awesome. You grab the remaining choice C and move on with the test. And for the record, yes, 50 plus 4 is 54, which is a multiple of 9. It's 9 times 6. So C is correct. We're going to grab this and move on with the test. All right, folks, before we take a break, let's take a look at one more strategy. This is kind of like the cousin strategy to back solving. This is called picking numbers. We'll do one question where I do it with you to show you how it works, and then we're going to do one question on your own. So the idea with the picking numbers strategy is that you will make up values for the variables in the problem and solve the problem using the values that you made up instead of algebra. This is a strategy that basically has one job. It is to avoid algebra and replace it with arithmetic. Let's see how that works, because I know it's a lot of theory to dump on you, but here's how it actually works if you get your hands dirty. So question number 4. Step 1. Question is, what's the value of 2q over 5p? Information is 5p over q equals 5 halves. Now, I know I've got some mathematicians here who are going to be like, oh, Boris, this is easy. Can't you just isolate the p, substitute in, p and q, cancel out, and you get your answer? Yeah, sure. If you see that instantaneously, go ahead and do that on test day in step 3, the strategy step. But if, like most people, you look at this and go, huh, it's time to pick some numbers. Let me know in the chat, folks. What do you think is a really convenient number to make up for q? You always want to take a moment and try to pick convenient numbers that follow the rules of the question. Servani's on the right track. Cybri 5. Yeah. If we make q2, then it matches the 2 on the other side of the equation, which then means that we can make p1. Pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. Notice that if p is 1 and q is 2, 5p over q does equal 5 halves. You can pick whatever numbers for p and q you want as long as it comes out to 5 halves. That's the only rule you have to follow. Now check this out. The question's asking for the value of 2q over 5p. Do note the test makers tried to be a little tricky here. They flipped it. Now the q is on top and the p is on the bottom. But that's fine. I'm going to color code it. Our q value was 2, and we did that in red. And our p value was green. It was 1. Hit me in the chat, folks. What is 2 times 2 divided by 5 times 1? Nice job, Artur. Nice job, everybody. Yeah, 2 times 2 is 4. 5 times 1 is 5. It's 4/5. And then are we done? Step 4? Shockingly, yes, because the answer choices are numbers. If they're numbers, that means the test makers did the job for you and they figured out that you get the same number every time. Well, if you get the same number every time, you only have to test it one time because it's going to be that one every time. You can just grab choice C for champions. You can move on with the PSAT. For a lot of people, this is going to be much faster than doing the algebra. In fact, I know how to do the algebra. I would still do this because it is faster. Just because you can do the math doesn't mean that it is best for you to do the math on the PSAT. A backdoor approach like back solving or picking numbers might get you the answer faster and with less chances for error than the proper algebra, even if you know how to do the proper algebra. Okay, here's our final question, number 5. I'm going to give you a hint. Think carefully about the number that you'd want to use for the unknown if you go with picking numbers. Again, I'll give you 90 seconds. You won't see the timer, but you will see me pause my camera, and when a minute and a half is up, we're going to review. As always, pop your answer in our amazing poll master David's amazing poll. I'll see you soon. All right, everybody, let's take a look at our final question before we take a break. Here, step one, the question is kind of confusing. How many students were enrolled in 2021 as a percent of the enrollment in 2019? Like, if you read the question and have a huh moment, it's time to skip the problem. That's part of the reason why this method is the way that it is. You don't want to spend time doing a question if you don't even understand what the question's asking. How are you supposed to get the answer if you don't even understand what the test makers want? So skip it, save that nonsense for later. Now, after doing some work on percents, you might recognize what's going on here. The test makers are basically asking you to take the number in 2021 and divide by the number of students in 2019. And it's like, come on, PSAT, why didn't you just say that? But that is what the test makers are asking in a roundabout way. So if that makes sense, then you go ahead and proceed with the question. And of course, do please ask David, Nick, and Steve if you are not quite sure why the question that I highlighted in peach translates to what I wrote here in blue. Okay, now the information is the gripping tale of the changing enrollment numbers over time, but the test makers did not give you the initial number of students in 2019. Let me know in the chat, folks, what do you think would be a really savvy number to pick for the number of students in 2019? This is a pretty good PSAT hack that will probably show up at least once on your test. If there are percentages mentioned in the question, then a really good number to pick is 100 because percents are out of 100. 100 is not the smallest number, and often you do want to work with small numbers. But when percentages are involved, 100, despite being big, actually works out much more easily. In fact, let's take a look at how this question continues. We're told that in 2020, there were 75% as many students as in 2019. So how many students, how many actual students were there in 2020? Very nice, Varchas. Very nice, Madeline. Love the suggestions there in the chat. Yeah, it's just going to be 75. Because any number as a percent of 100 is just itself. 75% of 100 is 75. 42% of 100 is 42. It's just very, very easy when you make 100 your base. Now, you do have to be careful in 2021. In 2021, it was 20% greater than 2020. Okay, well, in 2020, we have 75 students, not 100, so you have to actually do some math here, folks. What is 20% of 75? You can put this in your calculator. You can do this mental math. I like to think of it as 20% is a fifth, and a fifth of 75 is 15. So we're going to have 15 additional students. That brings our total, 75 plus 15, up to 90. Now, a little bit of an interesting moment here in step 4. Can we just slap a percent symbol onto 90 and we're done? Could we just do that? Are we actually done with this question? You have to be very careful. Step 4 is a step we have in our method to make sure that we dodge tricks and traps on the PSAT. Sometimes the test makers will give you some algebra to solve for x, and they'll be like, what's x plus 3? Ha 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 ha. And if you forget to add 3, you get the question wrong. So you have to be very careful. You need to take your time, make sure you're done. But here we actually are done. We can just go ahead and grab choice C for champions because the question's asking for the 2021 number over the 2019 number. Well, guess what? We're awesome and brilliant, and we picked 100 for the 2019 number. So whatever we had for the 2021 number would be that over 100, which is that number percent. Another reason why percents are great starting numbers. Grab choice C for champions and move on with the PSAT. Now, I saw Varchas asking about our notation here, 1.2 times 75. Yeah, this is a shortcut, which if you stick around tomorrow, we'll take a look at percents and you'll see how this works. But briefly, you could take 20% of 75, which is 15, and then add that to 75 to get the total number of students, which is 90. However, a shortcut, instead of multiplying by 0.2 and then adding it back to 75, you could just multiply 75 by 1.2 and you get the answer in one step. So it's like a little shortcut when you're working with percentages. If it makes sense, great, use that. If not, that's okay. You can just do it the slower way. It's only one extra step and you'll still be fine on test day. So again, always do whatever is going to work best for you. Now, that's it for math for today. We're going to take a break. Rich, our tech wizard, is going to get a 5-minute timer set up for us. Folks, I'm going to see you in 5 minutes. Please stand up, stretch, take a break from the screen, relax, and enjoy life. When we come back, we're going to work on verbal, and that will conclude our PSAT practice for today. See you folks in 5 minutes. Great job in this first hour, and please enjoy a break. Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's dive into our second hour. We're going to review the strategies for reading and for the writing and language portions of the PSAT. Now, for reading, this is one of the biggest game changers that we teach in the entire course if you take a full class with us, or here in PSAT Prep Live if you're just here for the weekend. This is how to do what's called active reading. Basically, reading in a different way than you might normally, and that is designed or tailored to get more questions answered more quickly on the PSAT. Here's the big idea. When you read for school, it is important to understand what you read. Like, duh. Because if you don't understand what you read, then when you get tested on it later, you're not going to get the questions right. It's also important to memorize facts. Like if you're reading a chapter from your AP Bio textbook, or if you're reading a chapter of The Great Gatsby for English class, then later when you get asked, about things that happened or certain facts from the chapter, you won't get those questions right if you did not remember those details. But on the PSAT, we actually don't want to try to understand what we read, and we also do not want to memorize what we read either. And that's a really big change. A lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people read passages on the PSAT just like they read for school. They think, well, this is called the reading comprehension test, so I should try to comprehend what I'm reading. But you're not really tested on your comprehension skills. What you're tested on is your ability to answer the questions. That's all we care about, is answering questions. We're not there to read. We're not there to learn stuff. We're just there to answer as many questions correctly as we can. And the way that you do that is, instead of memorizing facts and understanding complicated concepts, you should try to make an outline, and you should focus on the big picture, meaning what is the passage about and what is each paragraph about. Then, if questions ask for details that you don't understand or don't remember, you look them up in the passage. This is an open book test. So that's the idea. You can explain it in a few minutes, but practicing it might take you, some number of hours. And luckily, some of that practice time starts today. We're going to get a head start on it. Let's take a look at a passage and see how this actually works. So you'll find this in your handout on page 28. And you're going to want to grab the handout linked at the top of the chat if you haven't already gotten it, because of course you'll need to be able to look at this passage in order to see the passage while you're doing the questions. So we read the blurb, and what we're hoping for from the blurb all the time is the topic of the passage. Sometimes the test makers will give us the topic in the blurb, and sometimes they won't. This time they do. Read this blurb and let me know, please, in the chat, what will be the topic or the broad subject of the passage that we're about to read. Yeah, it's the last word of the blurb. Biomimetics. Whatever that is. We already know before we even begin to read the text of the passage, it's going to be about biomimetics. So then we read the first paragraph, and honestly, all we really care about in the first paragraph is, is there anything that this paragraph does besides introduce the passage topic? If, like Madeline and Varch's got the topic, fantastic. If this is just introducing us to the idea of biomimetics, then that's all we really care about, and we don't need to add anything else. Let's see. Art is said to imitate life, but so can science. The field of biomimetics, yay, is founded on the idea of scientists, researchers, and engineers copying natural systems to solve human problems. Applying this notion in various forms through the centuries, early inventors often sought to replicate natural observations. One of the best known early examples of biomimetics is flight. In the 1480s, Da Vinci made sketches of his ornithopter, which illustrated the principles that he thought would allow man to fly. Later, designers and engineers like Otto Lilienthal and the Wright brothers would build on these principles, leading to human flight. Today, researchers are studying the dynamics of bird wing shapes to create morphing robotic wings that would allow for easier maneuverability. Okay, well, let me know in the chat, folks. Besides just introducing us to the topic of biomimetics, what did this paragraph talk about that maybe we'd want to go back and look up if a question asked for a detail about it? Notice how we have flight. If you're ever stumped on the PSAT, look for repetition. There's a good chance that if something's being repeated, it's a topic that should go into your notes. We have flight, we have fly, we have flight, we have wings and wings. Yeah, so we got Cervani, very nice. We have an example of how it's used. And you can even note that if you want. You can put like EX, for example, flight or flying, and we can move on with the PSAT. All right, let's take a look at the next paragraph. This paragraph is really long, but notice as we go through, we're not super worried about long paragraphs. A lot of people, when they first take the PSAT, they're very scared of long paragraphs because it's so much stuff. But if you let go of this natural human drive to understand all this stuff and to memorize all this stuff, then it's actually not that big of a deal. No matter how much the PSAT says on one topic, you get that topic into your outline and you're done. Follow along with me and think about what you would annotate for this paragraph. The ability of the wandering albatross to travel up to 500 miles in a day with minimal wing flaps is another natural occurrence that engineers are studying in order to calculate energy-efficient trajectories for wind-propelled drones. Love this opening sentence. This is like a dream jackpot topic sentence because it tells us pretty much everything that we're likely to ever want to need for this paragraph. Let me know in the chat what annotation is useful to make for your outline from the opening sentence to this paragraph. Now, you don't have to note everything that I note. There's no one true way to annotate. We've got to annotate whatever way is going to work best for you. But one thing that you could note is, okay, so if biomimetics is using nature to solve human problems, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And then what is the natural thing that we're getting inspiration from? In this case, we are studying the wandering albatross in order to try to make better drones. So question asked about albatross, question asked about drones, bam, look it up in this paragraph. If no question ever asked about either of those things, we never have to read this paragraph ever again. So I saw Sravani got the albatross. That's fantastic. Varchas shows why they're studying. Indeed, why are they studying the albatross? It's to try to make better drones. Now look, on the PSAT, you should read all this. Read this text. Because you want to make sure that the author doesn't change gears and suddenly start talking about chocolate chip muffins. Okay, well, then we'd want to put that in the notes. But I'll spoil it for you a bit. This all ends up being about the drones and the albatross. So you'd read it on test day and go, yep, don't care about any of these facts. I am on to paragraph 3. Okay, so paragraph 3, I'm going to let you take the wheel. I'm going to put 30 seconds on my timer. Read through this paragraph and try to figure out what you would annotate in the margins on test day if this was your paragraph on your test. See you in half a minute to review. All right, everybody, let me know in the chat what was something that you annotated for this paragraph. You won't always do this, by the way. It just happens to work for this passage that it makes sense to annotate like the natural thing that the biomimeticist is studying and also like what human application they're using for. For here, we have surgical robots. So we got some robot surgery going on. And to solve this problem, we are studying the octopus. Now, Sravani, Cyber-i5 just nailed it. Surgical robots and octopuses. If you got that as your notes, you're done with this paragraph. Great job. Let's take a look at this one. Again, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Read it. Think about how you'd annotate it. And when my timer is up, we're going to review. Enjoy the practice. I do want to stress that there is no one right way to annotate a passage. There may be lots of different ways you could tackle a paragraph. This one is one that has some flexibility in how you'd annotate it. Let me know in the chat, folks, what did you put in your margins for this paragraph? So right off the bat, the test makers give you the animals, the thing from nature. Got beavers, bats, Battlestar Galactica. So beavers and bats. You know, if you focused on the part of the body, like if you wrote fur and tongues, that's fine as well. There's variety in how you could annotate this. And then what is it for? I saw Virtus mentioning the wetsuits. Yes, these hair-covered wetsuits. If you focused instead on like the general thing, how it said earlier, how fluids can flow through hairy surfaces, that's totally fine as well. If you put the wetsuit, which is the actual ultimate application, that's totally fine. And the test makers also threw in adhesives, like glue and stuff. So you could have annotated that as well. So if a question asks about that, you can look it up in this paragraph. All right, folks, we have 2 paragraphs to go. Let's take a look at this paragraph. Again, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Read it, annotate it, and we'll step back and review it. Good luck. All right, what famous invention from way back in 1941 does this paragraph teach us about? This paragraph gives us the history of Velcro. So a question asks about Velcro, you look it up here. No question ever asks, you never have to care. That's my mantra always. Like if a question asks, I look it up. If a question never asks, I don't care about this. I can purge the information from my mind. You're not there to read. You're not there to learn about Velcro, folks. You're there to score points. So read it once, make your annotation, and move on. This is really useful on the PSAT and SAT. It may even be most useful for those of you ultimately taking the ACT. Out of all the pre-college standardized tests, the ACT has the least amount of time per passage. So a lot of people who prep for the ACT in particular get scared because they think that they are slow readers and that they're running out of time because they're not reading fast enough. Not true. People spend a lot of time trying to learn the information, try to memorize the details. When you give up on that, you can be a slow reader and still get through the passages with time to spare because you're not spending all this time thinking and rereading to process the information. All right, now the last paragraph is our wrap-up paragraph. As engineers and scientists have proven, not every design requires a novel approach. The natural world already holds many intriguing solutions to human problems. Careful study of nature has enabled lots of innovation. With more research, we can furnish a future in which nature-inspired design enhances the artificial world. Okay, so this is basically ooh-rah-rah, yippity-skippity-doo, biomimetics. It's so cool. It's the best thing. It's great. It's wonderful. That's the paragraph. Don't memorize all this. Don't spend time navigating and waving through all the difficult sentences. Basically, just read it, get the main point, and you can move on with the PSAT. So let's take a look at some questions, and you'll be able to see how this approach can really help you score points quickly. As always, our poll master David will have the polls open for the questions as you work, so we can keep the chat free of spoilers. Here comes number 1. This passage is written from the perspective of what? Well, if you're focused on the big picture, these big picture type questions you can answer pretty quickly. Go ahead and pop in the poll the choice that you would pick because it matches the big theme of the passage. Well, we know the passage was about biomimetics. So it can't possibly be choice B or choice D because neither of those choices refers to biomimetics in any way. What's the difference between A and C? Well, A is advanced biomimetics, whereas C is biomimetics to a general audience. This is not advanced biomimetics. This passage introduces us to what it is and gives some examples. It's not advanced, so we're going to get rid of A and stick with choice C. You could have answered this one just from like the opening blurb, which said, this is an online technology magazine describing the field of design known as biomimetics. That's going to be introductory. That is not going to be advanced. So we're grabbing C for champions here and moving on with the test. Quick reminder, if you haven't already, grab the PDF at the top of the chat so that you can see the passage as we also try these questions. Here comes number 2. What does the style of biomimetics enable scientists to do? Well, you might want to go back and brush up on the definition in the first paragraph, but as we talked about a few times, what this field of science lets people do is use things from nature to solve problems that humans have. So go ahead and vote in the poll for the answer choice that matches the main idea of this passage. One thing I will note is that there is one right answer, always. And there are always 3 wrong answers. There will never be 2 good answers and one of them is better than the other one. That never happens on the PSAT. So if you ever find yourself stuck between 2 choices, chop them up into bits and find the flawed bit. Every wrong answer always has some specific thing that is flawed about it. A says, replicate the functions of any animal? No. Not every single animal that exists, just some that might be useful for human applications. A is extreme, we're going to cross it off. C says that we're going to discover new species of animals. No. We're not discovering new species just to solve problems. We're using animals that we already know about and how they do things to solve problems. So we're going to get rid of choice C. Like, in other words, we didn't discover the octopus in order to do robot surgery, right? The octopus has been there. We've known about it for hundreds of years. And now we're like, hey, about those octopuses, maybe we can use them to make robot surgery. So we're going to get rid of choice C. And then choice D, the focus on choice D is getting insight into animal behavior, but the focus of the passage is using insights about animal behavior to solve human problems. So D has the cause and effect backwards. We want to get insights into animal behavior that help us develop technologies, not use technologies to learn about animals better. So everything is wrong about A, C, and D. There's something that's wrong with each of those choices, but B has no problems with it. We're going to grab B for Boris and move on with the PSAT. If you're not sure why the right answer is right or why any of the wrong answers are wrong, this is a good thing to ask our teaching squadron behind the scenes, David, Nick, and Steve. Just ask them. With reading, it's very easy. You can just name a choice and be like, why is that wrong? Or why is that choice right? And another PSAT instructor who is here today could help you get some extra insight that would help you make the judgment on your own on test day. Number 3. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous? All right, for these questions, we always want to predict. Let me know in the chat, folks, which paragraph is most likely to tell us about the field of biomimetics and what it lets scientists do. As you look over your outline, you might notice that a lot of the paragraphs are specific examples. So the one that would most likely tell you something about biomimetics in general is the first paragraph, which introduces us to the field. So to be clear, what I want is a choice that says, find inspiration for creative problem solving in natural forms and processes. You want to imagine that a friend of yours is not convinced that B is the correct answer. Which line in the passage would you point them to prove to them that B is right? Now, Varchis, Madeline, Cervani, Cybri 5, we're definitely looking in paragraph 1. And it's basically like the second sentence of the passage. The second sentence says, the field of biomimetics is founded on the idea of scientists, researchers, and engineers copying natural systems to solve human problems. That is what proves that choice B is the correct answer on number 2. So we're hoping for a jackpot. We're hoping that there's an answer choice that includes lines 2 through 5. If there is, we'll pick it and move on. If there's not, something weird happened, skip that question and move on. These command of evidence questions, they should never take you long. Either you pick your jackpot immediately out of a lineup, or the lines you're hoping for aren't there, and then you skip it. But in this case, the second sentence of the passage is here. It is in choice A. You can grab it, you can move on. Most people on test day will actually read all of these line references and think about it like, oh, does this prove the answer? Does this prove the answer? Oh, let me read this one. Does that prove the answer? You don't want to do that. Don't read all of the references. Instead, predict what line you want to see in the answer and pick the choice that has that line if it's there. Okay, 2 more questions for this passage. Number 4. What is one reason for studying the flight patterns of the wandering albatross? Butts if I know. I have no clue. On the PSAT, don't panic if you don't know the answer. You're not supposed to know the answer. If you know the answer, that means that you were memorizing stuff while you read, which you're not supposed to do. That's a waste of time, most likely, since most details won't get asked about. But now that a question asks us about the wandering albatross, we'll look it up in that paragraph. Remind me in the chat, folks, in the wandering albatross paragraph, what was the reason that the scientists are studying this animal? We happen to annotate this, but if you hadn't annotated it, it's still okay as long as you knew the wandering albatross was paragraph 2, because you could go look it up. It was to make drones. Now, the test makers were very crafty in how they wrote the answer choices, because you see that every single answer choice has drones in it. This is one where you have to work a little bit for your answer. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to analyze these choices. See if you can find the one that does not have any flaws, and put your answer in David's poll. Good luck. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review. So choice A says, develop a potential model for wind-resistant drones. Now this choice illustrates a very important feature of the PSAT, which is that when you see mumbo jumbo in an answer, you have to make sure it's the right mumbo jumbo. The test makers can and will throw in random junk into a choice that just sounds fancy, but is actually nothing to do with the passage. Like if it had said develop a potential model for chocolate chip muffin drones, that would be wrong. So you have to check this wind resistant thing. Let me know in the chat, folks, are these drones wind resistant? No, they are wind propelled. Oh, PSAT, I will get you. Look, don't be mad if you fell for choice A. A lot of people will on test day. Don't be mad at yourself. Don't be mad at the test for being tricky. The trickier the test is, the better the curve is, and the easier it is for you to get a scholarship, because you have to get fewer questions right to beat a given percentage of the test-taking population if a lot of that population is falling for traps that you're not. Learn how to dodge the traps yourself. Check the mumbo jumbo to make sure it's the right mumbo jumbo. Arthur, Delphi, Melon, Madeline, Cybri 5. That's right, Mart Varchus. Yep, they use wind to their advantage. They're not resisting the wind. Improve the efficiency of solar-powered drones. Okay, are these drones solar-powered? No, they're wind-propelled. So we're going to get rid of choice B. Sounds good? Is not at all the type of drone we're talking about. C, design long-range drones that mimic its soaring arc. Again, check this against the passage. Are these, in fact, long-range drones? And are we trying to mimic the soaring arc of the albatross? When you go back to the passage and check that out, that works. Because these are long-range drones. It says they perform long-range monitoring missions in remote areas. And we are checking the arc of the albatross to make these drones. So everything works. Long range, yes. Soaring arc, yes. Everything is good. We're going to go ahead and grab choice C for champions and move on. So, big takeaway from this question. When you see scientific language in the choices, or any kind of technical language, even if it's not a science passage, check to make sure it's the correct mumbo jumbo, not just some random fancy sounding thing that the test makers made up that sounds good. And by the way, choice D, studying weather patterns is not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to update drone software. This is an engineering issue, not a software issue. We want the drones to be able to go far. So it's not choice D. We're going to grab C. Okay, last question from this passage. What's the main purpose in the final paragraph? Well, the final paragraph, if you look at your notes, that was the ooh-rah-rah, go biomimetics, go, it's awesome paragraph. So go ahead and vote in the poll for the answer choice that says, in so many words, yippity-skippity, biomimetics. Nice work here, folks. The author likes biomimetics and thinks it's great. So choices B and C with their Debbie Downer attitudes, like it does not actually provide solutions, it will fail. Get that attitude out of here. Positive vibes only. Now between A and D, D says that it might be useful in the future, and it's only a recent development. This is not true. Velcro dates all the way back to 1941. Well, technically 1955 when it got refined, but still, that was a long time ago. So nice job, everybody, getting rid of choice D. We're going to cross this off. Majority of us went for choice A. That's the choice that says, look at this, biomimetics, isn't it cool? And we're going to grab that and we're going to move on with the PSAT. All right, folks, nice job on this passage. We're not going to do all of the questions for the second passage, because I do, of course, want to make sure that we spend some time on writing and language. But what I'd like to do is give you a chance to practice this passage strategy fully on your own from start to finish. I'm going to give you 4 minutes, which is an aggressive amount of time. But take your time and try to do what we just did on the previous passage on this one, where you read, don't worry about memorizing facts, don't worry about understanding difficult concepts, just create an outline of the topics in each paragraph. We'll review your outline and do one question when time is up. I'll see you in 4 minutes. Oh, and just so we're clear, you'll need the handout for this for sure, because I can't show you the whole passage on the screen at once. The handout is at the top of the chat, and it is slide 40. So I'll see you folks in 4 minutes to review your annotations for this passage. Good luck. All right, folks, welcome back. Let me know in the chat, folks, what was the topic or the broad subject of the passage that you just read? It won't always be this nice, but in this particular case, we do have another great situation in the blurb. The task makers tell us the topic. This is a passage about collectivist and individualist outlooks, whatever that means. And you can abbreviate this more, by the way. I wrote out the whole thing because I have a keyboard and I'm teaching, but of course on test day you can use whatever shorthand as long as it makes sense for the next 10 minutes. Any chicken scratch you want to put down in the margins is totally fine. So, first paragraph explains what we mean by collectivist versus individualist outlooks, and that's all we care about. So, Servani, Madeline, Varchis, Arturo, Cyber 5 nailed it. We can move on to paragraph 2. So let me know in the chat, folks, what was paragraph 2 about? Huge, long paragraph. This is your first real chance to practice on a gigantic paragraph, making an annotation, not getting overwhelmed by the length of the text or the difficulty of the concepts. What did you put for paragraph 2? There's a few different ways you could annotate this. One thing that you might have noticed is that there is some contrast happening in this paragraph. By the way, Arturo's wondering, can you go back for a second? Absolutely. So here are some notes for paragraph 1, if you wish. Yeah, Madeline, in paragraph 2, we get some characteristics of each. And these characteristics focus on differences. We've got this nice contrast phrase, on the other hand. So there is some information about the individualist, there is some information about the collectivist, and the phrase on the other hand signals that you're getting some differences. So characteristics is one note that you could have made to summarize the fact that, like, hey, a question asks about, like, what is each type of culture like? Maybe look it up in this paragraph. And then differences, if a question asks about the differences between the two. Now, I noticed Servani in their notes has actual information. Individualists, importance of individual, whereas collectivists through connections. That's fantastic. Like, if you happen to actually understand the content, then certainly putting in a little bit of extra information in your notes is not a bad idea. But you have to tailor that to yourself. If it doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. You can stick with the more minimalist notes that we have in this paragraph together. Okay, we have an even longer paragraph. Holy moly. Well, let me know in the chat, folks, what does this paragraph talk about that you can summarize very briefly for your outline? Remember the trick we talked about before. If there is a lot of repetition, that may point you towards the topic. In the opening paragraph, we learn about a study done in 2001. So we have some study members and some other study members doing things. We have more information about the participants, and then participants, and then participants. So everything here, all the way on down, is from this 2001 study. So if a question asks about that study, then you can look it up in this paragraph. If no question ever asks about the study, then you never have to care about anything that this paragraph said. And oh my goodness, this paragraph said a lot, but notice that even at the end, it goes back to research. So all of this was about the study that was conducted to indicate the differences between the two types of cultures. Now, I saw Arturo and Madeline emphasize the differences. Servani also put Japanese and Americans, which is fantastic. So if you're comfortable getting some of the content like Americans versus Japanese, American-Japanese differences, like Madeline said, that's fantastic, and that will make for a really good annotation in your outline. All right, we have another gigantic paragraph. This is a passage of huge paragraphs. Let me know in the chat, folks, what was this second to last paragraph about? Well, notice how it says, it stands to reason This can have real world impacts. And then the next sentence says, for instance. So most likely this paragraph is going to have the consequences of having one type of outlook or another. Arturo says how differently they think. That's a really nice way to put it as well. Basically, what's actually going to happen? What are going to be the results of having one type of outlook or another? The final paragraph makes a point that neither perspective is better than the other. Both have their benefits and drawbacks. The author concludes by saying that you should try to recognize your own cultural perspective, and it's not the only valid way of interpreting the world. So both have value in the world. The collectivist way of looking at things and the individualist way of looking at things. This is really important because whenever there's two things talked about in the passage, one thing you should think about is, well, what's the author think? Like, which one's better? Is one better? Is the other better? Or neither? And this is definitely a neither passage. The author does not think that either way is better. Both are good in their own ways. By the way, if you want to see the notes, I see Arthur's asking for us to go back. That's in the handout. So I'll take a moment to plug this. If you scroll all the way down, the handout is super long, and that's because the second half of it is all of the pages repeated with answers, or in the case of reading comp, with notes. So we'll continue on for now, but do note that in the PDF, you can see the notes in the second half where we have the answer key. Let's do just one question for this passage, but try to do the remaining questions on your own, 7 through 10. It's really a nice exercise. You read the passage, take some notes, let some time pass, and then see how well you can answer the questions using your annotations, even after the passage has not been seen in a while. What's the main purpose of the passage? Last reading question of the day. David, if you'd be so kind, please give us a poll for number 6. I'll give you folks a few moments to look at the choices and pick one. Good luck. All right, everybody, welcome back. This was a passage about two different types of cultures. And the author gave you some information about some of the consequences of being in one type of culture versus another. The only choice that says that in so many words is choice A. So we're going to grab it and we're going to move on with the PSAT. Everybody pick choice A. If you have questions about some of the other choices, do please ask. I can go over them, or Steve, Nick, and David can go over those questions or those answer choices. But fantastic job, folks. So you see how by sticking to the big picture, we can very quickly pick out the correct answer. All right, so try number 7 through 10 on your own. Together in our final 20 minutes, let's discuss the Kaplan method for writing and language. This is in your handout on page 52. And as we try some questions, I am going to give you a shorthand of this method, just like how I did for math. Today, you might not know how to answer some of the questions because you might not know some of the content rules that the questions are testing, and that is fine. Don't worry about if you don't know how pronouns work, or didn't know the modification rules, or didn't know the difference between an adjective and an adverb. That's okay. Today we're just going to focus on the steps, and then if you come back tomorrow, we'll review some of the actual content rules that you need for the PSAT. So here's how it works. First of all, you always want to read the whole passage. Don't skip any of the text. You will need it. The time that you save skipping it is going to be paid back with interest, because you're going to need that information later, and then having to go back and try to find stuff in the passage that you skipped is going to take even more time. So read the whole passage, and then when you get to a question, the first thing you want to do is figure out the topic. So let's see. In the business sector of New York City, giant corporations conduct their business in colossal towers. But what about the individual who wants to operate a business without being subject to the whims of corporate shareholders? How can such an individual realize her dreams to own a business, perhaps not equal in size to large corporations, but at least their rival in ambition? Blank, the eager entrepreneur has two options. So we look at our choices. Life goes on, never fear, don't worry, in fact. Let me know in the chat, folks, what seems to be the topic that this question writer was intending to test with these choices. Again, totally okay if you don't know. In fact, it makes sense that you wouldn't know because we haven't gone over any of the topics. But how would you say it if you happen to have any intuition about it? These choices have very different tone. Life goes on, never fear, don't worry. In fact, those are tonally different, and we were trying to pick a choice that matches the tone of the passage. Once you've identified the topic, you go to step 2, where you eliminate choices based on the passage. Let me know in the chat, folks, which choices here just don't sound good. This is clearly a fairly serious, scholarly sounding passage. So which one has more informal language? Very nicely put here by Varchas, like formal versus informal phrasing. Yeah, we want to cross off choices in step 2 that are on the informal end. If the topic were punctuation, we'd cross off choices with bad punctuation. If the topic were subject-verb agreement, we'd cross off choices that have wrong subject-verb agreement. Here the topic is tone, formality versus informality. Because this is a formal passage, we're going to cross off the informal choices. Life goes on, never fear, and don't worry are all really informal, so we can cross all of them off, and this time we don't even need step 3. We're going to go ahead and grab choice D and move on with the PSAT. Now, if you were thinking about eliminating this choice, in fact is a transition phrase, so it is perfectly fine to use in a formal passage. What it indicates is emphasis. So the previous question asks a question, or sorry, the previous sentence asks a question, and this sentence says, actually, there is an answer to that question. So we're okay with emphasis here, and it's the only choice with formal language, so that's the only one that survives step 2. We didn't even need step 3 on this one. Step 3, if multiple choices survive the elimination step, we check to see which of the surviving choices is correct, concise, and relevant. Correct means doesn't break any rules. Concise means not repetitive or unnecessarily wordy. And relevant means it's on topic. Now, to see how we might use step 3, let's check out one more question. For the confident entrepreneur looking to succeed on her own, there is sole proprietorship. In a sole proprietorship, there's one owner who is solely responsible for the business and any decisions regarding its operation. Okay, so we see that this is a question that tests pronouns because it's, there, it's, and its. Those are all pronouns. Whenever you've got a pronoun question, let me know in the chat. You want to figure out what the pronoun stands in for. So let me know in the chat, what does it stand in for in this sentence? In this case, the pronoun refers back to the business. And the business is singular. So let me know in the chat which choice can we eliminate in step 2, because it is plural, and it would not be a valid pronoun to use for a singular business. Madeline, Varcha, Cybri5. Nice job here. Artur, exactly. We're going to get rid of B. There is plural. So that choice is gone. Now, in this case, a lot of choices survive step 2 because A, C, and D all say its. So they're all trying to do the singular pronoun. On this particular problem, the most important use of step 3 is the correct step. So A, I-T-S with an apostrophe means it is. That's not good. You would not say any decisions regarding it is operation. A is wrong in step 3 because it is not correct. And then choice D, that's just not correct. It doesn't even matter what the context is. ITS apostrophe, folks, it's never a thing under any circumstances. It's just always wrong. So we're going to get rid of choice D. And okay, now that we've done step 2 and step 3, we can narrow it down to choice C for champions. It's the only choice left. There is our possessive singular pronoun. It's, ITS, no apostrophe, means belonging to it. That's exactly what we want here. The operation belongs to the business. We're going to grab this choice and move on with the PSAT. All right, folks, nice work. This is another time now where you're going to need to grab your handout because I am going to give you 3 questions to do on your own, 3, 4, and 5. I'll give you 2 minutes, which is a bit more time than you would normally have, since on average you have about 30 seconds per question. But this is just your first time doing the method, so once again I'm going to put the method steps on the screen. As you try each question, try to work through these steps. Even if you're not quite sure what the topic is, that's totally fine. Do the best that you can, and when 2 minutes is up, we're going to review these, and that will do it for today's PSAT practice. Good luck, everybody, and I'll see you in 2 minutes. Hey folks, welcome back. Let's review these 3 questions and then wrap it up for today. We're going to start with number 3. So this one says, of course, as with all choices in life, it does not come without its share of disadvantages. All right, hang on a second. So we have another pronoun, it. But all of the answer choices are not pronouns besides A. They are all things that try to replace the pronoun. So while the topic here is pronouns, it's a little bit of a different spin. The question is, can we use a pronoun at all, or do we need to get rid of the pronoun? So let me know in the chat, folks. Can we use a pronoun at all in this sentence? The rule for pronouns is this. Whenever you use a pronoun, which is a word that stands in for some other noun, it has to be 100% clear what the pronoun refers to. In other words, there must be exactly one possible thing the pronoun could stand in for. If there is nothing for the pronoun to stand in for, or if there are multiple things the pronoun could stand in for, then the pronoun really can't be used. So here, when we see it, what could that maybe stand in for? I mean, it could be life choices. It could be the business. It could be operation. It could be decisions. It could be owner. It could be sole proprietorship. Heck, it could even be the confident entrepreneur. There's like a billion things that this pronoun could potentially stand in for. So what we have is an ambiguous pronoun, and that means that we're not allowed to use a pronoun at all. We're going to get rid of choice A. This is a really useful rule, one of many rules that you'll prep throughout, your PSAT preparation process. If you have a pronoun that is ambiguous, the only way to fix it is to not use a pronoun at all. Now, what is it, folks? We have to actually use logic now and figure this out. What is it that doesn't come without its share of disadvantages? Notice that it's not business this time. In the previous sentence, it's referred back to business, but this isn't saying that business doesn't come without its share of disadvantages. It's saying that sole proprietorships specifically, that one particular form of business, has some disadvantages. So it's not C or D. The only choice we can pick is, feels like it's been a while, choice B for Boris. Grab it and move on with the test. Notice that is like all the way back here, past a whole bunch of other singular things that could have been the target for the pronoun. But Ethan Varchis, Cybri 5, nice job grabbing that choice and moving on with the test. Number 4. So we have sole proprietorships aren't seen as separate blank their owners. All right, this is idioms. This is where basically in English we have arbitrary rules that certain words go with certain other words. So, for example, if you have a model, then something would be modeled on it. Not modeled after it, or modeled at it, or modeled by it. It's modeled on it. Why on? Don't know. It's just an arbitrary thing. So same thing here. How are you separate? Well, it's separate from. It's not separate with, separate between, or separate by. So we're going to just get rid of B, C, D in step 2. And it's choice A, no change. Grab it and move on with the test. Quick reminder, you're a PSAT god. So if you think a choice is right, it's right because you're awesome. No change is a choice that burrows into people's brains. They get all weird about no change, choice A. Don't get weird about it. It's just one of the 4 choices. So it's going to be right 25% of the time. Don't do anything extra when you pick A that you wouldn't do if you picked B. Grab it and move on with the PSAT. Okay, folks, our final question of the day, number 5. If our entrepreneur is lucky enough to have a group of like-minded acquaintances with blank to start her company, she and her associates might instead opt to form a partnership. Okay, so we have a pronoun, again, because who is and whose and whose and whom, those are all pronouns. The thing is, in this one, it's very clear what the pronoun refers back to. It refers back to acquaintances. So in step 2, which answer choices can we eliminate because they're just not good pronouns to use for acquaintances in this situation? It's a flexible question. You might be done after step 2, or you might not be, depending on what you choose to eliminate. So here we might eliminate B because that is who is, which doesn't really fit here. We have a group of like-minded acquaintances with who is to start her company. Nope. And then choice C is possessive. No. She's starting a company with these friends. These friends don't own anything. So we're going to get rid of B and C for sure. Now, you might have gotten rid of A or D. Might have gotten rid of one of them, and then you'd be done. But if you get to this point and you're like, crudskis, I don't know the difference between who and whom. Here is the hard and fast rule. If you would rephrase the sentence and say he, she, or they, that's a who situation. If you would rephrase the sentence and say him, her, or them, notice that 2 of them have an sound. That would be whom with the So in this case, which one would we use? Well, if we were to rewrite the sentence, we would say something like, our entrepreneur will start her company with them. So nice job, Arthur. Very good, Melon. Very good, Ethan. Yep. We would say it with them. She'd start the company with them. So we want the whom. Now, look, if you love grammar and you're like, Boris, that is some hack and slash situation going on, shouldn't we just observe that this is the objective case and who is subjective and whom is object? Like, yes, if you know all that, that's fine. But on the PSAT, remember, you're not there to do grammar. just like you're not there to do math or read stuff. You are there to score points. So if you learn a concrete, practical, hands-on rule that lets you score points on the PSAT, hey, that's good enough. And don't force yourself to study linguistics if that's not your jam. We're going to grab D for domination here and move on with the test. Now there are some more questions for this passage. So you've got 6 and 7 to try on your own. So do please check those out. Practice the method. Again, that's what's the topic, eliminate based on topic, and check to see which choice of the remaining ones was correct, concise, and relevant. Grab the PDF if somehow you still haven't gotten it, because it's got a lot of great review, including answer keys to all the questions that we did today. Thank you folks so much for coming. I hope to see you in a Kaplan class or tomorrow if you're coming back for the free PSAT weekend. Great job in these 2 hours. Good luck in your PSAT preparation, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care.